Okay, we are on Parshas Chayei Sarah, and the Chayei Sarah, it starts off with the life of Sarah, which is interesting because she died when Abraham came back from the binding of Isaac, known in Hebrew as the Akedah, which means binding. Um, the she Sarah was told not by Abraham but by someone else uh, that Isaac had been put up on the altar, and before they could say he lived, she had a heart attack and died. So that's a child of her love. That's the child she's waited for, and so she was in such shock. So she died after 127 years. And so now Abraham has the job of he just did the greatest
Stephen
thing.
Lewis.
Hi, Stephen. He just did
Hi.
the greatest thing in a man as possible. Offering his own son, which he in the end was stopped from God because it was only a test to see if he would do it. He then finds out his wife dies because of it. He goes, well, where's the justice in that, God? And that says a lot about Jewish life. You do something, it's heroic, and then you go out of business. You go like, well, what was that all about? It's like, that's how. Well, we just don't see the bigger picture. We don't know. So Abraham, now he's got his wife dead before him. He's in the city of Hebron, and there's a burial cave, and that's how they did it. And they still do it. They take bodies into caves and they leave them there. It's underground, and so that's what he had a tradition that Adam and Eve are buried in that very same cave. He wanted to acquire that cave. He knew it was a very special place. So he has a negotiation. I'm not going to go through it, but if you want to go through the negotiation, it's very interesting to see how he does negotiate. Every time that he wants, or his opponent wants to make sure that people hear the terms, they say listen, not see. They use see to negotiate. They use the word see to play to push the envelope. But when they really want to make a deal and say this is what I'm offering or this is what I want, they say listen, because you can't fake out your ears. You can fake out your eyes. You can't fake out your ears. You know what you heard. You know what you heard. So he, in the end, does acquire this for an extravagant amount of money, and it's the Jews. And from there, you're going to have Abraham will be buried there, first Sarah, then Abraham. Isaac will be buried there. Rivka will be buried there, Isaac's wife. Jacob will be buried there, and Leah, not Rachel, because Rachel has her own tomb outside. That's another story. We'll get to it later. Leah will be buried there. So you have the three patriarchs and three matriarchs and Adam and Eve, and that's why it's such a holy spot. And who is fighting us for that spot today? Who's fighting us? The Muslims. The Muslims say it's their place. Now, where else are they also fighting? They're also fighting on the Temple Mount, right? King David bought the Temple Mount. It's documented in the Book of Kings, which is written 1,000 years before Islam ever crawled out from under a rock. And then we'll see later on that Jacob pays for the place that became Joseph's tomb. And who lives around Joseph's tomb in Nablus? The Muslims. Everywhere that we have it documented that we bought the land, they contest us. That's how it's very interesting in that way. So we know that the Muslims have, they read the books and they say, well, that's ours. So we fight over Hebron, but that's where the matriarchs are buried, and that's why Hebron is one of the four holy cities of the Jewish people. Now Abraham doesn't have a wife, but he does have a son, Isaac, and he's got to get him married. Isaac is at this point 37 years old. It's time to get married. So he doesn't he's old, so he sends a servant. He doesn't let Isaac leave. Isaac cannot leave the land of Israel because he's, without getting too technical, he was a sacrifice, and he must therefore stay in the land of Israel. It's holy. He's holy. He was offered up on an altar. It makes you holy. I'm not going to go into the laws of sacrifice, but he can't leave the land of Israel. That's where he is. And there's people who do not leave the land of Israel, by the way. They will not leave the land of Israel once they're there. And there's a tradition like that. Not everybody keeps it. Then, so the servant, how's the servant going to find a wife? Abraham says, don't worry. God, I'm going to give you a document that says how much money I got. I'm giving it all to Isaac. You'll see that people will see he's very rich. Number 2, an angel will go before you and guide you, and I want you to go to where my family lives. Go back to the outside of the land of Canaan where my family lives, and hopefully you'll meet them. I want someone from my family. And the Jews, if it's interesting to know, we all come from a little family in Mesopotamia. That we all come, Abraham and Sarah was Abraham's niece. Then Isaac's going to marry his, I believe, his cousin's daughter. And then Jacob is going to marry his mother's nieces.
Sounds like the Ozarks.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? And there's Hasidim who stay also within certain. They like to marry first cousins, and there's one Hasidic sect that has problems with hearing because of the DNA and canceling out. Yeah. And that's why maybe we have so many genetic issues with each other, because we originally come from one stock. We've had converts and things, and so and now we've Sephardim and Ashkenazi, and now it's there's a blending going on. But yeah, that's how, because there's a certain stock of people that have certain character traits that we want inbred in the DNA, the spiritual DNA, and that's what Abraham says: get out the land of Canaan. It's a bad place. Get out of America. Go back to Europe and go get me somebody. So he goes back, and he, as it would happen, he says he has a prayer. The servant Eliezer, he has a prayer. Abraham's servant, number one's man, his wingman. He says, if she goes to the well, and I ask her to give me drink, and she gives it to me, and then she waters my camels, I know that's the woman. You're like, what? Okay, in those days, that's a good sign. So what happens? She goes, she sees this woman come out. He's at the well at night. That's where things happen, at the well. And she puts her bucket towards the well, and the waters rise miraculously up to her bucket. And he saw it, and he goes like, that's got to be the woman. And so,
and who is this? Wait.
Rebecca. This is Rebecca.
No.
This is Rebecca.
Who is the guy? I thought you said
Eliezer, the wingman of the number one man of Abraham. He's the servant. He's doing all this. He's trying to figure out.
Okay.
Right. And so is Abraham's servant. He sees this. And he asks her, "Can I have drink?" She said, "Sure." He drinks it, and then she takes the rest. He's done. Now she just gave a stranger out of her bucket water. Who is this guy? She takes, well, let me water your camels too. And she throws the bucket into the trough where the camels are. Why? Because who wants to drink from a stranger? So she threw the rest of the water to the camels. But now she's got to be committed to filling up the camel's trough, and that takes a lot of work. Anyways, that's how the story goes. So she waters the camels, and this guy says, this has got to be it. And he gives her jewelry, and then only then he asks her name. So she takes the jewelry. It's very symbolic what the jewelry means. She says, my name is Rebecca, and I come from the house of Bethuel. He goes, Bethuel, wow, that's the family. That's Abraham's family. So he goes, I needed to come talk to your family. He's invited in to talk to the family, and he explains the whole story. He repeats the story in the Torah a second time. He changes the story along the way, And how he changes the story teaches us a lot about what's going on between the two families and a lot of lessons in life. I'm not going to go through it now, but there's 24 places he changes the story about this incident that he had with Rebecca. So Rebecca goes with her nursemaid with Eliezer back to the land of Canaan, meets Isaac. There's an age difference. At the most, she's 14. He's 37. And he meets. It's very interesting. It says Isaac brought her into the tent of Sarah. He was in his mom's tent. He took over her tent. He married Rebecca. She became his wife. That was like sexual relations, and he loved her. Only after he marries her does he love her, because everything before marriage is like, you think you love her, but you're pretty infatuated. Once you get married and you start giving, and you should give a lot, the love comes from the giving. We're not going to get deeper than that right now, but then it says, and thus Isaac was consoled after his mother. Now he's got a wife, his own wife, and Rebecca is made of great DNA, and they're going to have kids, but it's going to take them 20 years, and that's next week's portion. I'm not going to go into it now. Now what happens? Abraham lost his wife. His son is married. Time to do what? Get a wife. How old is he? He's 140, I think. It's time he wants a wife. 140. So you say 140. How can the guy get a wife at 140? Okay, he was a very strong guy. People were living longer. They're living about twice our lifetimes. It's going to shrink down to about 120 years, the maximum, later on by the time we get to Moses. But right now, they're still living a little longer. And a bigger idea you learn out from this is, guys, we are never done being productive in this world until our last day. We may hit upon the most important thing in our lives in our 80s and 90s. We don't know. How do we know? We're stock full of wisdom, and God willing, we have the physical prowess. We keep going in life. You know, there's no such thing as stopping. So Abraham says, I got juice in the veins. I'm going for it. So he marries Hagar, who was his previous concubine, and they say maybe it was a concubine marriage. What's a concubine? A concubine is a woman that in the old days they would marry, but there would be no inheritance to the children. That's a concubine. A full wife, you give to the sons the property, and you take care of the daughters. The sons will take care of the daughters. So he has with this woman Keturah, he has 6 children, but he wants them out of Isaac's way, and he sees in them, this is what's very important, they cannot relate to God the same way Isaac does. They don't have that same spiritual capacity. Maybe because Keturah was on a much lower level than Sarah, which he was. Keturah / Hagar, same person, had Ishmael, who's the father of the Islam world, and so he has these 6 kids, and he sends them, it says, to the east, and he gives them gifts. And what were the gifts? The gifts were a way to relate to the world without God, and those gifts we can call today Buddhism, Hinduism, Taoism, Confucianism, which are Far East religions, which are more pagan and into spirit and into conscious thinking, but do not believe in a monolith in a monotheism. That's not what the East is about. And there we say Abraham. Anyone from the seed of Abraham is very powerful. If you're from Sarah and Abraham, you're more powerful. But we see there are people in the world, non-Jews in the world, who are very powerful people. They most likely come from the seed of Abraham. They have his DNA. How do we know? How can we figure it out? We can't. but we know that his seed is blessed. He'll be the father of many nations, and those people will be very powerful. So he gives rise to the East, to the leaders of the Eastern world. He dies. Abraham dies, and who buries him? And with this we're going to end. Who buries him? It says Isaac and Ishmael bury him together. Very important for the end of history. We say, Misa, Avos, Simin, Banim. What the fathers do, the children, it's assigned to the children. What the patriarchs did, it's assigned to us, 3,500 years later. Ishmael, finally, at the end, does tshuva. He repents. He makes up with Isaac, and he lets Isaac go first in the funeral procession and the leadership, but he joins him in the burial of his father Abraham. Guys, in the end, the Islamic people, the evil ones will be annihilated, but the Islamic people will come back to the Jews. They're our cousins. We fight them like crazy, but in the end of days, there's going to be some kind of reconciliation and respect with the two together, because we're very close, but we're not close enough. And that is this week's portion. We got I got 35 seconds for any questions, comments, or ideas. No? Okay. We'll do the communal hang up. Good Shabbos, everybody.
Good Shabbos.
Good Shabbos. Good Shabbos, everyone.
Shabbos.
Bye-bye.